Okay, let's talk about CFC refrigerants. Okay, this is the world you wasn't living in, or you might have been living in, but you wasn't working in yet. I remember when all this went down. When I was in the field, yeah, we had things like 502, but we usually only had a green tank, R22, and cars and refrigerators and freezers and everything was a white tank called R12. Man, the world was easy. Today you have blends and recovery machines and all that. What's a CFC? This contains chlorine, fluorine, and carbon, and it's the most damaging because the molecules are not destroyed before they reach the stratosphere. They have very long life when exposed in the atmosphere. They can be blown up to the stratosphere by simple atmospheric winds. Okay, now check this out. They contribute to global warming and they destroy the ozone. On July 1st, 1992, it became illegal to intentionally vent CFC refrigerants. Remember the Montreal Protocol under President Ronald Reagan when they made these restrictions. It became illegal to vent this, okay? They met in 1987 and it was enforced in 1989. Don't let that confuse you on the test. CFCs were phased out of production at the end of 1995. Okay, so back then you could buy the little white R12s at Kmart, and they were like, what, $1 or $2 for a can, and you'd go put it in your car. Suddenly it wasn't like that no more. It went from $29 for a tank to $1,800 for a tank when you couldn't get it anymore. Today, nobody uses R12, so if you still got that stock to store it up, I don't know what you're gonna do with it, because nobody wants it, okay? So your book says, here are some common ones. R12 was dichloro-difluoromethane. And that was one of the main ones. All of these refrigerants were phased out in the end of 95. Okay, any questions about that? Now let's talk about HCFC refrigerants. Like R22, which you're very familiar with, the green tank. This is the second group. They contain hydrogen, but they also contain the chlorine, the C. The amount of chlorine is small. They have a hydrogen atom, which makes them less stable in the atmosphere. Although these refrigerants are less potential for ozone, they do cause GWP and they do react with the ozone because they do have chlorine in them, even though they're less dangerous as CFCs. Now, total phase out is 2030. And of course, on July 1st, 1992, it became illegal to intentionally vent CFCs. Remember that for the EPA exam. July 1st, 1992 is when we stopped intentionally venting refrigerant into the atmosphere. Before that, refrigerant was cheap. They had a term called blowing the charge. And you would just blow the refrigerant out of the system, and then when you got done doing whatever you had to do, you were padded. We didn't have all these recovery tanks and all. In fact, in St. Bernard Parish, my boss was one of the first ones to get that tank, that big old giant recovery machine. It was big. It was like a big heavy window unit. And he handed me the instruction manual at night and said, hey, this is a new machine. Tomorrow you're going to start using it. Go home, learn how it works. And I had to carry this sucker to people's backyards, and it take like 6 hours to recover the Freon. Now, those are some dates you need to remember. Now, in 2010, before that, you had units. Let's say you went and bought a 3-ton condensing unit. When you bought it, it had refrigerant in it, R22, to go in the system. You just open the valve and it'd have 35 to 50 foot run, whatever kind of unit you got. In 2010, you could no longer do that. So they stopped manufacturing units in 2010 with refrigerant in them of R22. So they started coming dry nitrogen filled. And so if you bought our R22 unit, we had to put a label on it at Johnstone Supply when it came into inventory and put dry nitrogen in it. Because you know what was happening. People were buying R22 units and then opening them up with a vacuum thinking they had R22 in it like it had always their whole life, and suddenly it had nitrogen in it. So we had to put big pink and red pieces of paper on there for that. The other thing was the R22 units. We had to put a piece of green paper on there so people understood that. So remember, July 1st, 1992, you couldn't vent it. 2010, you couldn't produce it in units anymore. Then it kept going down. By 2020, January 1st, you could no longer produce R22, which was just a few months ago. In 2030, it's totally phased out. So for the next 10 years, according to the Montreal Protocol, which has never changed, you can still use R22 that's out there, but you cannot produce it anymore. Now, here's some dates. In 2004, they cut 35%. 2007, 65-70% of R22 stopped being produced. In 2015, there was a 90% cap on R22. All right? In January 1st, 2018, all HFCs sales had to be EPA certified. Okay? You can no longer buy refrigerant in stores without EPA certification. How do you think they knew to do 35, 90%, 65, 75% reduction? It's simple. The EPA allows companies in the United States to create R22 after they apply once a year to produce it and tell them how much in capacity they're going to make. And the EPA says yes or no. So in that way, they controlled and balanced the amount that was being produced. Okay, just in case you was wondering. The next group is HFCs, hydrogen, fluorine, and carbon. These do not contain chlorine. They have no damaging effect on the ODP. However, they do have some GWP effects. They do contribute to global warming. Now, on November the 15th, 1995, it became illegal to vent HFCs. Okay, you couldn't vent that in the atmosphere no more. Okay, make sure you write that down. That's going to be on your test probably. Okay, 134 is an example of an HFC. Even though it's not hurting ozone, it has zero ozone ODP. It does have GWP. Can't win them all, folks. Now, the HFC group, which contains these things, has molecules that won't okay, we already covered all that. All right, so 134A and 410A. Tetrafluoroethane and the blend of 410A are both HFCs. You'll have to know that on your exams. HFCs, 134 and 410A. That's the light blue tank and the rose colored tank. Pink, call it what you want. Any questions about the HFCs? That's what I thought. Now, your last page real quick is what is HFOs? Hydrofluoroolefins. These are new. These are the 4th generation refrigerants created for this century. All right? They use different oils and they have different makeups and those kind of things. Two popular ones are HFO 1234YF and HFO 1234ZE. Now, they have zero ODP and extremely low GWP, but they're expensive. They do have an A2L safety classification, means they're slightly flammable. Now, some of these things used in residential and all, and in cars, they're going to have special machines. I heard Toyota's got some that are here in America now, and they got a $5,000 machine they got to buy, and it costs over $1,000 to put a pound of refrigerant or something in your car. These are the stories I'm hearing. It's not really cheap or even economical yet to have this in your vehicle, but we are going to switch over to that sooner or later. Okay, it's just the way it's going to be. But in the meantime, they have not gotten rid of 134A, and they have not gotten rid of 410A. So don't be thinking that's coming anytime soon. It's not. Okay. Now, the last one on 229 is what? There's your olefins. There's your fourth generation and all that stuff I was telling you about that. Hydrocarbons. Now, we're going to return back to what they used to do in the 1930s. When people thought the Three Stooges were hilarious, which they were. They contain no fluorine or chlorine. They contain hydrogen and carbon. 0 ODP. 0. Why? Because these naturally occur in the atmosphere. Look what your book says. These are called natural refrigerants because they're created by nature and they're already in the atmosphere. Okay? They're natural refrigerants. Some of them have now been approved by the EPA. Okay? But the problem with these are they're highly flammable. They'll have red fittings on it and stuff to keep you from trying to braise and solder on it. They still contribute to global warming in excessive amounts not used in standard. So those are some names that you may know for HCs are methane, ethane, propane, and butane. Those are some of the things, some of the names for these natural refrigerants, okay? What else it says? Never use fuel grade propane. Confuse it with LP that you're going to put in your grill. Okay, don't do that. All right? It's flammable, but you can't do that. It's not the same. It's not the same. Okay. Nameplates and labels on units, that's on page 220. Caution, risk, service access for HCs. Notice I told you they're colored red. That's on page 230. Things like that. They got the labels on 231s for them and things like that. If you look at page 232 real quick, they have the safety classification for the refrigerants. And they're classified as which ones are safe and which ones aren't by those classifications right there. 134 is A1, 410A is A1, ammonia is B2L. They usually ask you on the EPA exam of stuff which one's A1 and things like that. You might have to know the most popular ones I just told you about. Remember, you must monitor, ventilate, and eliminate any combustible gases in an area. Okay, that's on page 232. Now, how they name refrigerants is on 233, the first digit right to the numbers fluorine, how many atoms, number 2. You don't need to know that. It tells you why they have a big A or a little a. If you want to read through that, you can. I'm going to get ready and start again on page 234 for the next lecture video.